From being abandoned as a child to ruling as one of the 4 emperors of the sea, Big Mom's story is one of the craziest rises to power and tragic downfalls in One Piece. She was a terrifying force who stood beside legends like Whitebeard and Kaido. She built an empire out of fear, power, and ambition, only to watch it all crumble at the hands of the next generation. In this video, I'll be breaking down the shocking rise, chaotic downfall, and potential that Big Mom still has left in the story. So make sure to stick around until the end to find out why Big Mom could still be a very important factor at the end of One Piece. Charlotte Linland's story began in tragedy, long before she became known to the world as Big Mom. Born with unnatural size and strength, she was abandoned by her parents at just 5 years old. She was left on the shores of Elbaf in the care of Mother Carmel and her sheep's house of orphans. Even as a child, Linland's power was unmatched, but with that power came a terrifying temper and uncontrollable hunger pangs. One of these hunger pangs led to disaster when she accidentally struck down Jorul, a hero of Elbaf, cementing her as both a danger and an outcast. This forced her to be relocated to a smaller island with the other children, and here is where Linland seemed to find brief peace under Carmel's guidance. But that wasn't for long, and on her 6th birthday, everything changed. During a feast filled with sweets, Linland lost herself to her hunger once again, and in an uncontrollable eating attack, Linland munched on everything in sight. And when the frenzy ended, Carmel and all of the orphans had vanished without a trace, and in their place, Linland found herself suddenly wielding the terrifying power of the Soul fruit. Though she didn't understand it yet, this moment marked the true beginning of her destiny. Alone and confused, Linland's future seemed uncertain until she met a strangely small man, Struzan, a wandering pirate and skilled cook. He had discovered her while wandering throughout the forest, and he quickly recognized her overwhelming strength, so he offered to become her friend and mentor. Together, the two formed the foundation of what would later become the Big Mom Pirates. With Struzan's experience and Linland's raw power, their partnership became the spark that ignited one of the most fearsome empires in the seas. Linland's destructive potential did not go unnoticed. After the incident on her 6th birthday, the world government quickly realized the threat she posed at just 6 years old, and she became the youngest person in history to receive a bounty, a staggering 50 million berries on a 6-year-old. No other child had ever been marked as such a danger to the world, and this bounty served as the first official acknowledgement of her inevitable rise. From that moment forward, Charlotte Linland was no longer just an abandoned orphan. She was a force of nature, destined to carve her name into the pirate era. As the years passed, Linland only grew stronger, her power and reputation expanding well beyond what anyone could have imagined for the girl once abandoned on Elbaf. By the time she turned 18, she had already established herself as a rising force in the pirate world, feared for her monster strength and unpredictable temper. It was during this time that she began building the foundation of what would become her greatest weapon, not just her power, but her family. At 18, Linland gave birth to her first child, Sparrow, marking the beginning of a legacy that would span decades. From that point forward, she made it her mission to bear children nearly every year, many of these births resulting in multiples like twins, triplets, quadruplets, and the largest one being decuplets, 10 babies at one time. What the heck? She was having all these kids with different husbands from around the world so she could make certain bloodlines and have alliances. Over the next 42 years, she amassed an enormous family of 85 children from 43 husbands, a feat that earned her the nickname of Big Mom. This ever-growing family would become the backbone of her pirate crew, bound together not only by blood, but by Big Mom's relentless ambition to expand her power and create a dynasty unlike anything the seas had ever seen. Big Mom's rise continued, and by the age of 24, her and Struzan joined the infamous Rocks Pirates. It was here that Big Mom fought side by side with names that would go on to define an era: Whitebeard, Shiki, Captain John, and Rox D. Zebek himself. It was also here that she first crossed paths with a young Kaido, only 15 at the time, who would one day become both her ally and rival. The Rocks crew was chaotic, filled with powerhouses whose egos constantly clashed, but for 6 long years, Linland remained among them, sharpening her strength and cementing her reputation as one of the most terrifying figures on the seas. When she was 30 years old, the world was forever changed at the legendary God Valley incident. The Rocks Pirates faced off against the combined forces of the Marines and Roger Pirates in a battle so monumental it was erased from the history books. During the chaos, Linland encountered a young Bartholomew Kuma and Emporio Ivankov, future revolutionaries who were swept up in the conflict. It was here that Linland stole the powerful Uwu Uwu no Mi, snatching it from Ivankov, only for it to later be eaten by Kaido. After the battle on God Valley was finally over, the Rocks Pirates disbanded. And there was a weird 5-year gap here for Big Mom, because we know that by the age of 35, Big Mom had really built up her own crew. So from the ages 30 to 35, there's a gap there with no information. We can assume that she was either working on her own crew or just laying low for a few years after the big fight on God Valley. Anyway, she returned to Struson's side, determined to build her own crew, her own empire, and her own vision of control. It's easy to overlook just how long Big Mom served under rocks. 6 years in total. The entire One Piece story we know so far is only like 2.5 years. So that time under rocks forged her into the leader that she is today and the eventual Yonko she became. This helped her lay the foundation for what would become Totto Land, an empire unlike anything else on the seas. Her vision was a paradise where every race could live together in harmony, but in truth, it was an empire built on fear, control, and manipulation. To strengthen her grip on the world, Big Mom used marriage as a weapon, taking dozens of husbands and bearing children to forge political alliances. Each union brought her new connections, new power, and new bloodlines to feed into her ever-growing pirate crew. One of her most notable children is Charlotte Pudding, her 35th daughter, born just 16 years ago to a man from the mysterious Three-Eyed Tribe. The people of that tribe are rumored to hold a sacred ability. When awakened, they can read the poneglyphs, the ancient stones that hold the secrets to the Void Century and the location of the One Piece itself. Pudding became a key piece in Big Mom's grand design, a daughter not only to strengthen her family, but to potentially unlock the path to ultimate power. Some of Big Mom's plans worked out really well, but then others worked out terribly. One of those that failed was her attempt to secure an alliance with the Giants of Elbaf. She arranged for her daughter Lola to marry Prince Loki, a union that would have finally given her the connection she long desired with the world's most powerful warriors. But Lola refused the marriage and ran away, humiliating Big Mom and shattering any hopes of peace with the Giants. From that point forward, the Giants started to despise Big Mom more than ever before. Still, she moved forward, trying to build her empire piece by piece. She expanded Totto Land into a vast empire of islands, all connected through her rule and her children's loyalty. Her influence spread across the seas, and with her unmatched crew of sons and daughters, she rose to the status of Yonko, one of the 4 emperors who ruled the New World. Her reach would soon extend even further, bringing her into contact with yet another race she sought to bind under her control: the people of Fishman Island. After Whitebeard's death, the island was vulnerable, so Big Mom swooped in and offered protection to Fishman Island. However, it came with a cost. She demanded a large candy tribute in return for her protection. The island had no choice but to accept. On top of that, the Sun Pirates, led by Jinbei, decided to ally with her, placing the island under her protection. The people of Fishman Island began to fear what Big Mom might do to them if they were to not meet the candy quota, and that fear came to a boiling point when Luffy and the Straw Hats arrived at Fishman Island. After defeating Hody Jones and saving the kingdom, Luffy boldly declared Fishman Island was now under his protection. To make matters worse, he intercepted Peckham's transponder snail and directly trash-talked Big Mom herself, promising to defeat her one day. This really angered Big Mom, and potentially, you could say that this was the beginning of Big Mom's eventual downfall. Fast forward in the story to Whole Cake Island. Big Mom had captured Sanji and planned to use him as yet another pawn in one of her political marriages. This time, her target was none other than the infamous Vinsmoke family, rulers of Germa 66. By marrying Sanji to her daughter Pudding, Big Mom sought to strengthen her empire with the military might of Germa's advanced technology and feared army. To her, it was the perfect alliance. But what she didn't count on was how far the Straw Hats would go to bring Sanji back. At first, Big Mom severely underestimated Luffy and his crew, and you'll notice later on that this becomes a theme. She sent only Charlotte, Cracker, and Brûlé to stop them, assuming they would be more than enough. But Luffy shocked the world by defeating Cracker in a grueling battle that lasted for hours, and once again, this made Big Mom very angry. So the next time, she sent out her entire army, and we get this cool sequence of Luffy battling this army, but in the end, they just overpower him, and he's too tired to fight. Luffy and Nami were captured and locked away in Mont Dior's book prison, seemingly stuck in there forever. But then, their savior shows up. Jinbei, who had turned his back on Big Mom to stand with Luffy, shows up and helps him and Nami escape. So then Luffy later reconnects with Sanji in a heartfelt moment over the simple act of sharing his bento. They apologize. Luffy tells Sanji that he needs him on his crew to become the Pirate King. Sanji reluctantly kind of joins back, and from there, the Straw Hats decide to wage war on Big Mom herself, crashing her grand tea party and attempting to assassinate her in one of the boldest moves ever made against a Yonko. The plan, of course, did not go smoothly. Their plans unraveled one after another, and Big Mom's uncontrollable rage transformed Totto Land into a war zone. In the chaos, the Straw Hats were forced to flee, pursued relentlessly by Big Mom in a near insane hunger-driven rampage, and somehow, against all odds, they managed to escape her territory alive, leaving Big Mom fuming with humiliation once again. That only got worse when she later returned home and read the newspapers. The headlines boldly claimed that Luffy had defeated her. For a Yonko who prided herself on fear and dominance, this insult cut deeper than any wound, and her fury only grew more dangerous. Big Mom wanted to defeat Luffy so badly that she called up her old friend Kaido, who she hadn't talked to since the Rocks Pirates disbanded. She informed Kaido that she would be paying Wano a visit to take down Luffy, and off she went. With some of her children, she hopped on her ship and set sail for the island of Wano. Soon after, in the chaos of the Wano arc, Big Mom shook the world once again, this time forging an alliance with her old crewmate and rival, Kaido. The two emperors decided to combine their strength, declaring that together they would seize the One Piece and dominate the world. It was a terrifying sight for everyone, even the world government, seeing two Yonkos combine their powers. Many people started to wonder how Luffy and his friends could ever take down two emperors at once. However, they didn't have to wonder for long, because soon the raid on Onigashima began, and Big Mom was in the thick of it, throwing her power around wherever the battle raged. Her presence in the war was chaotic and unpredictable. She clashed with the worst generation on the rooftop alongside Kaido, only to later be sent flying across the battlefield. At one point, she was struck in the face by Frankie's motorcycle and even headbutted by Ulti. Overall, Big Mom was getting cheap-shotted all night throughout the raid, but her downfall came when she faced the combined efforts of Eustace Kid and Trafalgar Law. In this entire story so far, Big Mom's greatest enemy was never the actual people she was fighting, it was her own ego. She treated the two worst generation pirates like children, mocking them, toying with them, and never once took the battle seriously. She refused to unleash her full power until it was far too late. Big Mom was convinced there was no chance a pair of upstart brats like Kid and Law could even challenge her, an Emperor of the Sea. How could they? Whether it was her arrogance or her old age, Big Mom underestimated them at every turn, and in the end, that mistake cost her everything. And so, after decades of dominance, Big Mom's reign came crashing down in Wano. Once a child abandoned by her parents, she clawed her way up through the world by sheer strength and unrelenting ambition. She built a family of 85 children, forged alliances across the seas, and ruled Totto Land as one of the most feared emperors in history. She stood alongside the likes of Whitebeard and Kaido, fought in the legendary God Valley incident, and cemented herself as a monster of the New World. But in the end, it wasn't an admiral, a Yonko, or even the Pirate King who toppled her. It was two members of the worst generation who just refused to bow down. Her arrogance blinded her, and her refusal to see the new era rising before her created her downfall. With one final defeat, Big Mom's empire slipped from her grasp, and the world moved on without her. From abandoned child to Yonko, her story is one of the best in One Piece. A crazy long rise to power, and then a devastating fall. Is this the end for Big Mom? Will she ever be seen again? Will her kids carry on her legacy? What will Katakuri do? The answers to these questions are still unknown. Let me know what you think in the comments.